Hello, I'm delighted to be talking about the Think and Learn CLIL pages and videos in the second edition of Superminds. The title of my talk is Using CLIL to Help Primary Students Think and Learn in English. You're invited to see what's new and what you can discover in the subject content, tasks, and videos. I think all are motivating, as well as conceptually and linguistically at the right level for primary students. The talk is in three parts. Why use CLIL to think and learn in English? What's new in subject topics and Superminds? And what else is there to discover in Superminds? First of all, we'd like you to write in the chat box why you use a CLIL approach. If you could do that, please, that would be great. Justina, can you make some comments?
Yes, so we've got a few answers coming in. Obviously, you'd use CLIL to improve students' knowledge, to have a meaningful learning. You can cover a range of topics that might be relevant to the students, to connect English with real world, from Luciana, and critical thinking, to vary lessons, to trigger creativity and critical learning, and critical thinking comes up again. So yeah, quite a range of ideas.
Okay, well, thank you for those. I'm going to show you this. I'd like to reassure teachers that although CLIL was actually not mentioned in the first version of Superminds, it certainly is in the new revised version. CLIL is very much alive and kicking, as you'll see from these 5 ideas here. First of all, last year, a big CLIL conference called Making CLIL Accessible to All. And in July this year, the conference is World CLIL, Sharing Classrooms, Sharing Worlds. And Superminds certainly achieves making subject topics accessible to all. And Superminds CLIL pages can lead to the sharing of worlds, whether the world of science, maths, art, or history. Secondly, CLIL research. Still many articles being published, and findings report that unlike other approaches such as EMI and CBI, CLIL has explicit learning aims within the topics. These are planned and evident in Superminds, whether noticing adjective word order or time phrases to talk about the past. Thirdly, CLIL books. I'll mention one here, Beyond CLIL, published by CUP in last year. In it, the authors discuss developments in CLIL and in particular, developing pluriliteracies. You'll see that pluriliteracy is also developed in Superminds when learners engage with subject topics and their projects. I think also what's very important is what teachers and pupils say about CLIL. And here are some hot off the press quotes sent to me from 2 teachers and 2 pupils. The first, a Catalan teacher working in Barcelona, who teaches a range of subjects in English in primary school. And she says, a CLIL lesson develops students' thinking skills and involves changing the traditional teacher-focused methodology to more motivating classroom practice. So all benefit. And I certainly agree about that. And also 1 or 2 of you mentioned about the thinking skills. And from her pupil, I feel important and an international scientist when going to the lab. So clearly she's lucky that she's got a science lab in her school. The second quote is from a music teacher teaching in England, and he's teaching music and Spanish in a primary school here. Teaching music through Spanish is fun. It's good for me as a language learner too, and a nice challenge. So very positive. And from one of his pupils, it's not that hard to understand. It helps us learn Spanish a lot. And we don't notice music lessons are now in another language. Finally, course books with CLIL pages, of course, Superminds, and they continue to be published with CLIL subject topics in them. I'm going to now show you a map of Superminds. There is no reason for you to read all this, but I just wanted to point out that the subjects selected are everything from maths in red to music and art in purple. Science is in dark blue. Social science I've put in a lighter blue. Geography and environmental studies appropriately green. History in brown, and PE in orange. You may notice that most history topics in CLIL programs tend to be taught at the higher levels, such as holidays in the past at the end of level 3, timelines in level 4, Shakespeare's theatre in level 5, and ancient Egyptian art in level 6. This is because of the language required to present history topics. Students need past tenses, adverbs of time, and more advanced topic vocabulary. On the other hand, PE is more popular at lower levels, such as the topic of body movements and sports equipment in level 2. All right, let's now find out what's new in Superminds. First of all, they're the big questions. For example, in level 2, what kinds of clocks are there? And 4, how do we play instruments? These big questions appear beside each unit in the map of the books, and they're addressed in each unit. I've given you some further examples here, but I haven't yet talked about the purpose of them. What I'd like you to do in the chat box is, can you give a reason why you think big questions are a good idea for CLIL subjects? 1 or 2 ideas about why, the purpose of these big questions and why they're good for CLIL subjects.
So Marlon says that it starts the thinking process. And because they generate thinking, speaking, building knowledge together. Katalin says it arises students' interest to make them more interested in the topic. Students can learn to think. It stimulates students thinking critically. It seems like the answers are sort of circulating around the critical thinking, yes, and piquing students' interest.
Okay, well, thank you for those. I would also agree with that, but there are possibly some more reasons which I'll share with you shortly. So my other examples here are starter level science, or skeleton, how do we move? This explores a science topic of the skeleton, and the big question enables students to express their ideas by making physical responses as well at starter level, as well as showing the verbs of moving. And you'll see this in the next slide. In the geography example, level 1 homes, learners are asked how are houses different? And the range of houses presented enables students to think about alternative homes such as cave houses, riverboats, yurts, etc. And to respond to the question, students think about concepts such as different shapes and sizes. In level 3, the social science topic, jobs at night, what's it like to work at night? This engages students in imagining who works at night and particular jobs that involves. They also think about disadvantages of night work. And in level 5 for history, the big question, what do we know about the theatre? Because the history topic focuses on Shakespeare's Theatre of the Globe. By this level, most students will have had experience of being in a theatre and will be able to share their knowledge, while others may have seen a theatre, though not been in it, or have seen it online. So let's look at the summary of the purposes. For me, to use or link the big questions from each topic and explore it more deeply in the CLIL projects, to get students imagining, thinking, inquiring, to activate students' prior knowledge of subject, content, and language. So it's a double whammy there. To motivate students to think outside the box, they'll have their own ideas, and to extend learning about subject topics at the end of videos. In addition, I think that the big questions are a way of introducing young learners to the scientific method. This often starts with a big question for students to investigate, usually through observing and experimenting. All right, I'd now like to turn to answer the question, how can students respond to these questions? So in the first idea is through tasks. In the body task for the starter level, matching children's movements with the skeleton helps them to imagine the bones in their own body, and inquiring further about how body parts move. For example, how do we move our heads? How do we move our arms, legs, etc.? At this stage, they might use a mix of L1 and English. In level 1, the task about homes helps learners to think of features of houses that make them different, such as location and interior features, as well as the shapes and sizes I mentioned previously. This task also gets students thinking about features of their own homes. Secondly, students can respond to big questions through the support of models. For example, projects in these units provide clear models for supporting both comprehension and production. In level 1, a label diagram of a treehouse with subject-specific vocabulary. In level 3, a text from a diary with times and autobiographical sentences. These models help students to feel confident doing the projects because they can see what's expected of them. And once projects are completed, they can evaluate their own work or a peer's work by comparing their treehouse or diary with that shown in the model. However, they need guidance to ask questions for peer feedback in particular. Does he or she have a clear diagram with labels? Does he or she have a text with times of day and actions? So this is an example of CLIL having explicit language learning aims with usually have, sometimes have, and these help learners notice word order, or the teacher can help them notice word order. It's also an example of getting students imagining the routine of a police officer. A third way that helps students to respond to big questions, of course, is through an abundance of visuals. Visual input is vital to motivate and support comprehension of subject concepts, and a set of clearly labeled real-life images offers effective support. Even at level 5, A2 level, defining features of a theatre would demand a considerable amount of language and probably demotivate the learners. But what else is new for thinking and learning about subject topics? In addition to the big questions, there are 3 other key elements that have been revised. Superminds now has updated and used subject-specific content, critical and creative thinking skills linked to the Cambridge Competencies framework, and documentary style subject-specific videos. Let's now look at all 3 features. New, thinking like a scientist. My first example is from starter level unit 6 on the topic of clothes. The subject is science, and students learn about the properties of materials, soft or hard, and for hot or for cold weather. The first task involves critical thinking when classifying one set of properties, and the project involves thinking about two sets of opposite properties, soft or hard, hot or cold. Students think critically again because they need to understand links between the ideas. Students think creatively by generating ideas about different clothes to draw in the Carroll diagram. For example, soft and for hot weather could be the sun hat, hard and for hot weather, the sunglasses, soft and for cold weather could be a woolly hat, hard and for cold weather, ski boots. Learners don't need to know the vocabulary for items they draw, especially those that are different from the book, but teachers can say the word in English if they wish. So these 2 pages contrast with those in the first edition, which used the subject of art to present clothes. The clothes were for dressing up and for uniforms. The tasks involved remembering and identifying, so they were less cognitively demanding than the tasks in the new clothes topic. I think you'll agree. And also new, thinking like a mathematician and designer. The subject is maths and the updated topic is geometrical shapes. This is more maths appropriate language than 2D shapes and very different from the music topic presented in the first edition. Here, the maths concept involves understanding sides and angles, as well as the concept of regular and irregular pentagons and hexagons. Students need to remember, or perhaps be reminded, of square and circle from level 2 of Superminds. And then the puzzle completion and activity 2 involves 3 properties: size, color, and shape. So if you can see the first one, students would have to respond with small orange triangle, big orange square, small orange pentagon, etc. And this again is more cognitively demanding, but helps students to notice the adjective word order without this being explicitly taught. To deepen learning, the workbook also shows pentagons, octagons, and triangle shapes found in living things. So in other words, the world of science. Pupils develop critical thinking when using skills of reasoning to solve the maths problems. And they also develop creative thinking during the project when generating new ideas for the designs of an insect or a bird. It's a very rich example of maths and English and design, all interrelated. My third example of new content is the infographics. Updated subject material is from level 5, unit 2. Curricular subject is science and the concept is ecosystems. In the first edition, only rainforests were presented. But this double-page spread can be described as an infographic where information is presented in a range of different forms. Images with definitions, such as the desert plants, explanations below real-life photos of concepts, such as the interrelationship between plants and animals in living together, a table with notes rather than extended text, and tasks on both pages develop student skills of analysis. Tasks also enable students to apply their knowledge and think about a science concept from a different point of view. For example, when they respond to the question, what ecosystems are near you? So the concept and learning are then personalized and therefore more meaningful. The project involves research, which develops both critical and creative thinking, because students first need to evaluate options about which ecosystem to explore, and then create new content from other resources. So all examples of new and updated CLIL you've seen so far, from starter level and levels 1, 3, and 5, in my opinion, are all conceptually at the right level for students learning about subject concepts in English at pre-A level for clothes, A1 level for geometrical shapes, and A2 level for the ecosystems. I'd like to show some further examples of how students develop their critical, but also creative thinking, and as the authors say, cognitive flexibility. This example is from level 3 history. What materials did cave artists use in the past? The specific component of critical thinking from the Cambridge Life Competencies framework is analysing links between ideas by comparing and contrasting them. This occurs in task 4 when students compare and contrast materials used by cave artists thousands of years ago with those used by artists today. So they could say, to compare, cave artists mixed water with powder to make paint. Artists today also mix water and powder to make paint. And to contrast the information, cave artists used red, yellow, and orange rock powder, but now artists use paints with many colors. So sentences can be produced at this level for comparing and contrasting. Of course, teachers may need to add support with sentence starters on the board or gap fills. The component of creative thinking from the Cambridge Life Competencies is generating ideas to create something new. And this happens in the project when students imagine, then make a cave painting for today's world. And then they describe it. And I think that's a highly original idea for students. Here, the worlds of the old collide with the world of the new. Perhaps the children might add graffiti on the house, which would show the artists today how they use city spaces to write things. I have one more example of critical and creative thinking from the CAMFLIC, it's called, the Cambridge Framework for Life Competencies. And this second example is from level 5, unit 5. What materials did Native Americans use? Well, students again develop critical thinking by using skills of reasoning this time to decide which material is appropriate for a tool they will describe in their leaflet. Creative thinking developed when students elaborate on and combine ideas about the objects they've read about, such as materials, why certain properties are suitable for making tools or other items. And then, of course, including drawings of the items in their leaflet is very creative too. Again, they have a very good model of what's expected of them. And so that gives the confidence to try and create a leaflet. I'd also like to flag up learning outcomes and thinking processes. It's useful to know that in the teacher's book, there are learning outcomes for the 2 CLIL pages. For example, here, to practice speaking and listening and shape vocabulary, to apply what students have learned about shapes to the big question to complete a project. And for the thinking processes, based on a model, they develop the creative thinking by producing an insect. And they're using different media to describe their design of the insect, and they're solving simple puzzles. Both the learning outcomes and the thinking skills are vital to help teachers to assess ongoing learning for CLIL lessons. For example, can students, or how well can students listen to or give instructions in order to color different geometrical shapes? How well can students apply their knowledge of shape vocabulary to describe an insect? made of different shapes? Can students solve simple shape puzzles using accurate vocabulary? And for me, there would be a big maths question with my maths hat on. I used to teach maths in English in the Netherlands to multilingual children. My question would be, what do students notice about the number of sides and angles in the geometrical shapes? So this, again, makes them really think and observe, and I hope would answer, oh, they're the same. My last examples of the revision of Superminds are the brand new documentary style videos for subject topics. I'll play 3 short videos, and they all help students to think and learn about the subject topic in English. Firstly, science video at starter level. Where can we find animals? Then a maths video with a question, what shapes can we see in buildings specifically? And third, a video about history with the question, what do we know about theatres? Now immerse yourselves in language and video footage.
Unit 4, Animal Habitats. What is an animal habitat? Where do these animals live? Look at the pond. The frog lives in the pond. The fish lives in the pond too. Look at the big tree. The small monkey lives in the big tree. The parrot lives in the tree too. Look at the grassland. The giraffe, the zebra, and the lion live on the grassland. What is an animal habitat? Let's find out more.
Well, I think you'll agree, all videos with animals capture children's attention, but this one, where can we find animals, I think is at the right pace for starter level. The 5 words from the book are repeated on the screen: pond, tree, grassland, frog, and monkey. And these enable very young learners to comprehend the video script. In addition, there's a range of familiar animals such as fish, parrot, giraffe, elephant, lions, and zebra. At the end of the video, the statement, "Let's find out some more," should encourage teachers to show images such as of a local pond with frogs and plants. Teachers can also encourage children to think about a habitat that has animals, trees, and grass. They're all part of the habitat. If children at this stage have questions about the video, such as "what's that?" when they see the squirrel or the beaver, say the word in English, and if you like, at this stage of learning, also in L1. And should there be students with different home languages, it's an opportunity to ask them the names of animals they've seen in their languages. And it's a rich way to approach learning vocabulary and includes plurilingual awareness, which is very important. The second video is the maths one.
Unit 1. What shapes can we see in buildings? There are buildings in all kinds of shapes and sizes, from the very small to the very tall, from the very old to the very new. We make buildings from lots of different materials, like brick, wood, metal, and glass. Some buildings are one big shape. 20,000 people work in this building in the United States. It's got 5 sides and 5 angles. It's a pentagon. This is a very busy airport in Germany. This building has got 6 sides and 6 angles. It's a hexagon. Some buildings have got lots of small shapes. Shapes that fit together make interesting patterns. A triangle has got 3 sides and 3 angles. And when we put lots of triangles together, we can make beautiful patterns and new shapes. Can you see the pentagon? We can see lots of different shapes in buildings. Let's find out.
I cut that slightly short. Let's find out some more. Not only does this maths video present geometrical shapes as patterns, but pupils see these shapes in real-life buildings in the US and Germany and other cities. Language from previous levels is consolidated, such as small and tall, old and new, made of wood, metal, glass. And at this level, the final "let's find out more" helps teachers to promote inquiry-based learning. Students can look at the photos or use online tools to find images of local buildings or buildings in their countries. Obviously, they would have to have specific geometrical shapes in their construction. However, the question can also lead students to find out which are the most popular materials used to make shapes in buildings. Is it glass, metal, brick, concrete? Another very dynamic video. The third one is the one on the history topic.
More.
Here.
Unit 7. What do we know about theatres? Today, there are many kinds of entertainment. But in the past, things were different. Before the 1940s, people didn't have a TV in their home. TV only became popular in the 1950s. Before TV, people went to the cinema a lot. The first cinemas opened over 100 years ago. But before that, the best place for entertainment was the theatre. And the theatre is still popular today. These days, when we go to the theatre, we sit in comfortable seats. The audience is very quiet when the play begins. Before they go on stage, actors put on makeup and costumes. They check that they can remember all the words to the play and that they've got all their props. Then the play can begin. There are many different kinds of plays. Men and women play lots of different characters on stage. Today, comedies and musicals, where the actors also sing and dance, are very popular. There's a lot of technology in a theatre today. Sometimes there are special effects during the play. The effects are often controlled using a computer. Theatre today is very different to theatre in the time of Shakespeare, but his plays are still popular. People enjoy the history plays about kings and queens. And they love crying at tragedies like Romeo and Juliet. The best way to enjoy the plays of Shakespeare is to see them at the Globe Theatre in London. Here, you can see what theatres looked like 500 years ago. Shakespeare's theatre was very different to today's theatre. Let's find out more.
So this video makes the vocabulary presented in the book really come alive. Students may be surprised at the dates given for progress in entertainment and technology. And when they see the actors being made up, being given props, practicing their lines, the language of the theatre is perhaps even more memorable than in the book pages. However, both book and video input combined provide a very motivating experience. For the final task, let's find out some more. Students may like to access the Royal Shakespeare Company's activities for children found on their website, and we'll provide that for you. There's the one that creates wonderful masks, eye masks. When showing a video, though preferably not when you do it the first time, and assuming that you do it more than once, it's useful to pause, as you know, and ask questions, depending on level and at what point in the lesson you're going to play it. Obvious one for starter, level 1, 2, what can you see? Levels 3 and 4, what is the same or different in the video compared with the book? And for 5 and 6, more thinking, is there anything else you'd put in the video on this subject topic? And by levels 5 and 6, students really like imagining theatre. So my summary of the content of the videos is here. I think as I said, vocabulary in the topics in the books come alive. And I think this time, without a presenter, students focus on the video and script more fully. Subject-specific content presented in the book and the video, as I say, leads to more memorable learning. And let's find out some more encourages inquiry-based learning. My other question is, what else is there to discover in Superminds? And I've got 2 points I'd like to make. I think the new revised edition presents plenty of opportunities for cross-curricular learning, and also opportunities for developing pluriliteracy. Before I give you examples of cross-curricular learning, could you put into the chat box any example of cross-curricular learning that you might use when you're doing an ELT or a CLIL lesson? What's a cross-curricular link that you could make? Justina, do we have some examples coming up?
We don't have anything in the chat, but what comes to mind is some of the things you mentioned, Kay. When we teach vocabulary about food, for example, could we link it up with geography? So where does different food come from?
Yes.
Where do what kinds of foods do people in other countries eat? Would that be a cross-curricular link?
Yes, of course. And that's a very good one, because students today are not always very good at locating maps and where countries are on a world map. Obviously using digital maps, of course, is exciting. So that's very good practice with the geography skill of map reading.
We've got a really nice example from Sumani, who says teaching English and PE, so part of bodies, for example. Yes,
the TPR, this total physical response, is very good. All right, I'm going to show some examples here. This is an example that I've seen in action in Catalonia, not with Rebecca, the science teacher, the subject teacher that sent me the quote, but the topic of edible plants was linked with the work of a painter called Arcimboldo, and an Italian painter who painted some very strange portrait faces, but using animals, fruits and vegetables. So what the children did was either drew or painted examples of fruit and vegetables to make the face, or what I thought was the most effective was actually making a collage, cutting out the fruit and vegetables and sticking it down onto a poster. And the good thing about that was when they were giving group feedback, they could say, oh, yes, you've used carrots, they're roots. And look, you put some leaves for the ears, that's from the letters. So they were using the science language to evaluate really the artwork. And another example here is geography and technology. So technology is a subject that comes into nearly everything today. So students at level 5 here are often inspired to find out other uses of technology. And in this instance, it's drones. So drones are introduced for the topic of farming. Teachers might like to help the students think of positive uses of drones for mapping places and for search and rescue locations. Obviously, avoiding the topic of drones in war, especially now. Other opportunities for cross-curricular. My examples here for geography and homes. Students could look at the homes presented in the book and then respond to the question, what's your favorite home? Once a tally is taken on the board, students can draw a bar chart and then look at the numbers and interpret them. 6 of us like the houseboat best, 10 of us like the tree house, etc., etc. So mixing the geography and maths. In the geography wonders of the world, again, maths example here. In the text of the wonders of the world, there are many numbers, and the students would classify them according to type of number, length, height, and age, and then find out about measurements and age of famous buildings in their city or country. Are they greater, smaller, or older than numbers in the text that they've read? In level 5, the history topic that you saw the video of, students could find out about technology used for special effects in theatres today, and also the purpose of it. For example, changing light and sound effects, using 3D printing for some props, and designing tiny microphones so that they're not seen when actors speak. My last point here relates to the Beyond CLIL book that I mentioned at the start of the talk. And it's about opportunities for pluriliteracy, and there are ample in Superminds. So for subject literacy, for the science, you saw them reading properties from the Carroll diagram at a young age, and the maths describing patterns using maths language of shapes. Literacy in English, such as understanding, interpreting the range of texts from the labels to explanations in the ecosystems infographic. Visual literacy, when they examine their images related to the theatre, when they interpret and create diagrams, and also, of course, the videos that they watch. Digital literacy is developed whenever the teacher's book or the teacher suggests a project can be done using online tools. For example, in level 5, there's a project about finding out about an active volcano. Each of these literacies offers the exciting idea of developing primary students' pluriliteracy so they can learn more deeply. So I'd like to sum up by saying, I think there's an abundance of evidence to prove that Supermind 2nd edition has new motivating big questions, new and updated subject-specific content, new projects and videos, all of which develop creative and critical thinking, and in addition, opportunities for cross-curricular learning and developing pluriliteracies. Wow. In other words, Superminds provides a very rich and authentic CLIL experience to help primary students think and learn in English. Thank you. And now over to you for questions.
Thank you, Kay, very much for this inspiring session. There's lots to take in around CLIL subject. It creates so many opportunities for life competencies, for motivating, using language in so many different ways. Before we dive into the questions, we noticed there's been a lot of questions about the materials. Where does your wonderful examples come from, and where teachers can find them? So I would say, again, it's Supermind 2nd edition. And the series is available worldwide. If you contact your Cambridge representative, they'll be more than happy to talk to you about it. And you can also find out more online at cambridge.org/superminds2. That's superminds2 with a digit 2. And you can go to cambridge1.org to download a demo of the digital components with some sample videos from the course, so you can see more of the visuals and try it in class. So let's dive into questions, Kay. Sometimes there's not enough time to do the projects and the pupils really want to do them. What do you advise?
I think that's a common issue in many CLIL spreads. I think there are ways you can do it. You know, for example, if students are told produce a project, I mean, they can do it in pairs or groups rather than individually. And if the teacher assigns roles, then there's not overlap of everyone searching on the computer or everyone doing one thing. So giving roles to groups, I think, speeds up time. If we're thinking of the early stages, if you think about the two projects of the Carroll diagram and the tree diagram, what a teacher could do is actually, if they're allowed the paper, photocopy a blank Carroll diagram so that the students are just ready to put things in it, the headings, the 4 words, and the clothes drawings. They won't spend ages trying to draw all the boxes and things, which often loses time. And the same with or what teachers could do is cut up bits of string to make the 4 boxes, put them on the floor and write labels to put at the side of the boxes and at the top. And then students can put their drawings into the boxes on the floor. For the tree diagram, again, it's very useful to hand out even just a half page with a circle and the lines of the tree house. So again, they don't spend ages trying to make this perfect, and they just get on with the labeling and the furnishing. So it's being practical and thinking about how can I make this easier for them and concentrate on the real learning point. Group work, and also sometimes with gap fills. So if they have to write a description, I think they did in the maths, remember they had to write a description of their insect, you could provide a gap fill. So the students are just putting in the names of the shapes and maybe colors. They don't have to write everything.
Lovely ideas. Thank you, Kay. There's a question from Sori, and it's around the use of first language in the class, and it's probably especially important around CLIL lessons, where you would think that a level of language required is slightly higher. What would you advise with regards to use of first language?
It's still a contentious point, but I think if it's a teacher, you definitely have to justify it. And a lesson I've seen, which was certainly justifiable, was an Austrian primary teacher teaching the names of spring flowers. So she said them in English and then German because she wanted the children to compare them. So for example, tulip and tulpe, primrose and primel, snowdrop and sneglötche. So this was a very rich experience of an example of pluriliteracy because they were learning new words in their first language and in English. And it made it more memorable for the children. They could see, or if they sounded the same, they weren't spelling them the same, but if they looked the same and the teacher wrote them. So that I would say is a very constructive way of using L1. The example I gave before for the starter level, when students are there with a different home language, it can be very valuable to include them by saying, what is camel in your language? What is squirrel or giraffe? Some of them will sound very similar and some will sound very different. So I think it depends on the age group. You know, if children, you've got to think that some, or remember that some children might be really good at number and maths or science, and they know in their first language what to do, and they want to communicate this. So on occasion, in a task, especially with pairs or groups, I think it's acceptable for a child to mix L1 and English and move on.
Thank you, Kay.
But the teacher must be able to justify use of L1. It's not really, you can't just do it because you don't know the words. So.
Thank you. That's a really important point there. Slightly, I would say, related question is about the mixed ability classes. How can we help students in that situation when we have students who finish tasks a little bit faster than others? How can we address that?
I think there are several ways of differentiating. If you're differentiating a task, you can say you've got to make it achievable. So you could look at if there are 4 or 5, 6 questions, you could look at them and think, okay, which are the easiest to answer? And say to the less proficient learners, okay, I'd like you to try and answer question 1, 2, and 4, for example. And for the more advanced students, you could ask them to write another question about the topic. You always have to think about the children in the classroom who may cause problems, management problems, and these are usually the ones who need the support and the ones who may be fast finishers or more able. So you have to think of strategies for those children. And I think for the ones who are less able, again, providing gap fills, sentence starters, question starters, the key vocabulary for the CLIL project on the board, extra visuals, and giving them confidence, perhaps by using different ways with grouping. So sometimes it could be a friendship grouping and they might feel more confident to speak, or it could be that you, not always, but put some of the less proficient kids together and then you can help them in a group. But that I would not recommend that every time. I think you've got to vary the groups. Also, you could from the start of the year put them into 4 or 5 different groups with names. So if you know they're going to be doing animals, animal names, or material names. And so you then say, if you're doing group work, okay, all the tigers do this, all the polar bears do this. So that again, it's a different way of mixing them up.
That's great, Kay.
The last one, I think, is differentiation of the outcome. So if it's a project, and they've got to produce a whole fact file, you'd say to them, okay, I'd like you to produce, everyone can achieve 3 bullet points, but maybe some people can achieve more. So that they've all got the expectation of 3, and then some can do more. And that makes everyone feel quite confident, I think.
Lovely ideas. And I think we might have time for just one more question. And I wonder if you could say something about assessment and CLIL, Kay.
The key was the slide with the learning outcomes and the thinking skills, because in the teacher's book, all the learning outcomes are there. So it's up to the teacher, I think, to make some kind of spreadsheet with the learning outcome for each unit. So you're talking about 9 units. So the spreadsheet having the learning outcome, and then having well, okay, and needs support with a list of the children. And you observe, if you've got them for a year, observe perhaps 4 or 5 children a lesson, and you can see how well are they achieving the learning outcome. You cannot watch a whole class every day, every session, but over a term in the Netherlands, what we did is, as I say, I was teaching maths, observing them 3 times a term. So over a year, there was about 9 observations. And it meant that you had a record for a colleague, for the child, for another for parents if they wanted. But I think it's a good idea to start a simple spreadsheet for only the CLIL subjects. And then you can see the progress made in learning language and learning subject concepts. And that's why it's really good that in this book, subjects are repeated. So, maybe in science particularly, you can see them getting stronger in science over the level. I hope that's clear.
That's great, Kay. Thank you very much. I'm afraid that's all we have the time for today. Thank you so much to our fantastic presenter and expert, Kay Bentley, and to all our audience for joining us and for participating actively in this webinar, for all your questions. It's the first in a series of primary events, so I hope you can join us for the next one on the 5th of April. We'll hear from Matt Ellman about a creative perspective on communicative language teaching and helping to build young superminds. It sounds very intriguing. That's on the 5th of April. And don't forget to look out for an email next week with the recording of this webinar and a link to a short survey and your certificate. And if you'd like to learn more about Superminds, go to cambridge.org/superminds2. Thank you very much.
Thank you.